Alright, so welcome back to our new format on the Unknown Film Enthusiasts. Today we're going to be talking about The Darkest Hour, which I have not seen, but Nick has.
Yes, I have.
So, my first question really is, World War II is definitely a time period of absolute fascination, especially with Americans. The Darkest Hour, to my knowledge, is mostly about how Winston Churchill is dealing with, I guess, creating a treaty with the Nazis in some way. It was at least my understanding of it. So my question is, I'll start here. Is this a movie about World War II in great context, or is this a focus on Winston Churchill during the war?
All right. Little bit of both. Think Lincoln.
Oh, okay.
So if we look back at 2012's Lincoln, it was all about Abraham Lincoln trying to pass the 14th Amendment, I believe.
13th.
Yes.
Yep.
Or 13th. Okay. This movie is... It starts off, it's when Chamberlain is stepping down, and they need to find his replacement. Winston Churchill is next in line, and basically the beginning is bringing him forward. Everyone speaking their doubts because they're like, well, he's an alcoholic, and think about the Gallipoli disaster, because there was a big military folly, and it was all his fault. Basically, you learn about his own self-redemption in there. And then about halfway through, we learn about, oddly enough, second movie this year, the Battle of Dunkirk.
Okay.
And the whole second half of the movie is him figuring out how to allocate the resources, what the right steps to take are, and hoping not to have a secondary Gallipoli.
Okay.
And basically the whole thing is a build-up to when he presents his idea in front of Parliament and whether or not it will get passed.
Okay.
And basically the whole time he's speaking with the king, he's speaking with his advisors, and then it's like he has an epiphany when he sees how just in the few months that he's been in office, the difference, and the whole movie takes place over the course of, I believe, 2 months.
Okay.
So it's just, it's the difference between the public's view in the beginning, where you see England and everyone's bustling around and everyone is going about their day-to-day life, and then hard cut to several months later, and visual cues, it's raining, everyone looks more concerned, and then he talks to the people, and basically the whole thing is just a build-up of public perception, his own overcoming of his faults, and eventually whether or not he will have the support of the people around him, because a lot of people thought he is not the man for the job, and we need to have someone else instated in charge.
So is this then, if we look at the very beginning of that storyline, I guess, with his character essentially being attacked by by the Parliament, I assume, right?
Yeah.
Is this then, the purpose of this movie then is to say, like, this was a man that was not suited for the job but rose to the occasion kind of thing? Or is this like, this is the Winston Churchill that everybody knows, it just no one knew how great he was until he held the power?
I feel like, and on the outside, you see how he reacts to people, how he talks to people, his famous, he made like a judgment, which basically, like, in his mind, he was like, it's the right thing to do, and he like gives a thumbs up, but to the common people, that means like shove it up your ass. So you see originally the disparity between how the public views him, and then you quickly see the reflection of how he's actually dealing with it, and basically like how he responds to his wife, how he responds to the people around him, how basically he's insecure because he doesn't want to have another big failure, because he cannot, if he has this failure, he will not make it out. Yeah. And basically just how he certainly rises to an occasion, but he doesn't have a great change within him. It's more that he sticks to his guns, and it's the stubbornness that created an issue way back when that overcomes the issue now. So it's more about him trusting himself as opposed to following the rules of what the Parliament wants to do. Because basically the whole time they're just trying to say, just give it up to Hitler. Like, basically, if we give this up, we can prolong war. And he's like, but the big picture, like, think about what will happen if we do this. So personally, I like it more similar to the way I really liked Lincoln, because I feel like if you got a full autobiography of it, it would be less interesting. Yeah. And you'd be focusing a lot on things that don't matter. But I feel like putting him in this situation almost brings forward more character than you possibly could have throughout a lifetime, because you'd go so quickly so as to make it a movie that you'd glimpse over the greatness, And I feel like a good portion of this movie is just shown where even like someone who is greatly flawed, he's shown as flawed. He's an alcoholic. He's obese. He can't really control most of his thoughts and what he says out loud. And basically, a lot of people think he's they
shooting
think
off
he's
the hip and crazy.
Exactly. And it's very interesting to see how that can come to his advantage, or how it can he can shoot himself in the foot.
Yeah.
And circling back to the great character that he is. You cannot talk about this movie without saying how fantastic Gary Oldman is. Because I was very concerned with... When I saw the first picture, I was like, Jesus Christ, he looks exactly like Winston Churchill. And then I saw trailers, and I was like, is it Gary Oldman in a fat suit? And I was kind of worried. And then I watched the movie, and halfway in, I was like, oh yeah, that's Gary Oldman. And it completely... he was every aspect of the character to the point where you don't even realize it's him. And the first introduction to Winston Churchill, there's a dark room and there's a beam of light coming in because it's basically his secretary waking him up.
Yeah, okay.
And you hear the voice, and I'm like, that's Churchill. Wow. And then I also believe it was brilliant for them to do the voice first, because if you immediately just see Gary Oldman amble out, but it's not like, it never looks like. It looks like he's carrying the weight normally. He has the same stature. He's hunched a little bit. Every step seems labored.
Okay.
As if he was actually, like, extremely overweight. Like, Gary Oldman gave himself nicotine poisoning because he smoked so many cigars in the day to get into character. God. So
perfect.
Method acting. Notice he didn't mail anyone rats, Jared Leto. Fuck off.
Wow. And I think... I'm very happy to hear, because this is a movie like I haven't seen it. I'm one that I very much do want to see and will end up seeing hopefully very soon. So I think one thing that is important to talk about when you have these movies about strong and powerful leaders, as well as like, is this a movie then that is meant to credit him with being the greatest prime minister that Britain has ever seen, or is this an authentic telling of the person that Winston Churchill truly was?
It certainly does not sugarcoat it. Okay. So basically the whole time you are seeing someone who, he's not perfect. He even admits in there where he's like, I wish I could have spent more time with my family, but I had to do this for myself. And even his wife says, yeah, I regret all of the time that we could have spent together because you were off doing this. And it's never done to a point where you realize his greatness, not by them telling you that he's great, but more by showing you how he can overcome these faults, and even not completely overcome them, because there are certain things that he's extremely upset with the way things have gone, but he still can pull this one thing off. And it's more triumphant, because it's hard to think of someone like Winston Churchill as like an underdog, but in the story he's kind of shown that way. Because, if you only think about it from history, you're like, well, he's the guy who took charge in England in World War II and
saved the West.
Yeah, saved the West. Until an Iron Curtain was brought across Europe. Wow. But yeah, it never feels like a caricature. It never feels like we are doing this to show, oh boy, Winston Churchill was a great guy. It's not propaganda. Okay. And it's interesting because it kind of, it's like it's a mirror of how leadership should be, and whether that's a talk about the time, I don't know, or if it's just timeless, because if you look back on it, that's
how things always go.
This is how things always go. This is how they will continue to go, and there's almost no way around it. So it's the second best movie about Dunkirk this year.
And I bring that up. Maybe it's important to talk about it with Dunkirk's release, and then this movie afterwards. Like contextually wise, and like the time period of the time, you said that he presents the plan for the extraction of Dunkirk. I'm confused where Dunkirk event falls in the period of this time.
Because he is brought to be the prime minister.
Okay.
And then basically over the course of a few months, they're trying to figure out the war effort and whether they want to go into full out war, and whether they should send more troops, or whether it's worth it to lose these troops in order to make sure that a all-out war is not brought. Because if they take these troops out or send more troops in, that might lead the Germans to England and cause more conflict for them.
Okay.
So it's basically picking the lesser of two evils, but in the end, it's making the right decision about it. So I think it would be very interesting if someone made like a supercut of about an hour and 10 minutes into this movie, if we hear them talk about Dunkirk, hard cut to parts of Dunkirk, back to Churchill dealing with it. There's a point where he makes I'm commissioning civilian boats to go out and make the rescue. They don't cut away to it at all because it's not about the battle. It's about the politics battle. Yeah. And yeah, it's all in all honesty, it's a very well told political movie, and like it's not pandering to either side. It's not telling you this is the right way or this is the only way. It's saying he did what needed to be done. And that time, there are things you can take away and say maybe it wasn't the best thing to do, or maybe it was the best thing to do. But it's all in all, it's just a very satisfying movie experience.
That's good, and it's really cool that we have this nice connection between, you know, in the past year we have The Darkest Hour, and we also have Dunkirk as well. But the bigger question I think would be is how does The Darkest Hour connect to Signs?
Well, when we think about connecting this to Signs, we can say that Gary Oldman was in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes with Andy Serkis, who was in War for the Planet of the Apes with Woody Harrelson, who was in Zombieland with Abigail Breslin, who was in Signs. Signs sealed delivered. It's Signs. It's amazing how quickly I thought of that.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Thank you all once again for listening, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Bye.